Welcome back, 365 Sports from The Athletic. There are several people who cover sports business well, but Andrew Marchand, John Alran, the two best doing it. We've had John on before. We've never had Andrew. Very excited to have him. Andrew Marchand from The Athletic joins us now to talk Super League and the column he wrote with Stuart Mandel that dropped yesterday. And Andrew, this is one of those things that has been talked about theoretically in all kind of separate parts of this many teams going to a Super League and relegation and promotion and collective bargaining, and now all put together. What would you say is the likelihood of people getting on board, or is this idea still too early to even know if university presidents and conference commissioners are down with this at all?
So I think you can't really say for certain where everything's going to land. I think if you look at what their plan is, it does make a lot of sense to get to that. There's a lot of factors, but I do think there is a path because of what's oncoming, which, we found in our reporting, like I knew about, but the more you look at it, you can understand it. We all know about NIL. We all know about the transfer portal. We all know that there's a feeling that athletes are going to be paid. The one thing that I think is eye-opening when you go deeper into it is these upcoming lawsuits and what they could mean for schools, and how they're going to try to figure out solutions for collegiate sports. And the reason is these settlements or these cases could end up costing billions with a B, as in boy. And so you put all that in, then, then that kind of changes the chaos that could result, changes things. Now, all that said, the power is with the SEC, the Big Ten, ESPN, and Fox. You could also throw in Notre Dame and NBC if you want, more Notre Dame. They'll probably decide ultimately. So if you ask me to project, if you read this story, I would say that I'm not sure this group will be successful and they'll be the ones in charge of college football. But the ideas that they put forth, I do believe, at least some of them, I think we'll probably see the light of day at some point. And not that other people haven't thought of them or aren't working on this as well. They are. But there's some very influential people involved in this group.
What would you say would be the biggest sticking points to people like Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti?
Well, when you look at their jobs, they are the representatives for their conference. So if it's the SEC, you not only represent Alabama and Tennessee, but you represent Vanderbilt. You represent everyone in that conference. Big Ten, similarly, you have Ohio State, Michigan, and then you have Northwestern, right? Both Northwestern and Vanderbilt, tremendous schools, haven't been as successful as the other schools I mentioned in terms of their how they've done in terms of competing for national championships. The amount of money they get from their leagues, though, in terms of the TV deals, is the same. And so their job is to represent all of them. And so, like what we wrote about this college sports tomorrow, they would assess Alabama differently than Vanderbilt, or Ohio State differently than Northwestern. And they would make more money. That could be something that those schools would want. But if you're the conference head, that's not your job. But your job is to look out for everybody, not to say, all right, well, you guys go, let's do this. This is better for Alabama, or this, or this makes sense. I mean, the Big Ten schools are pretty happy right now with the deals they have. They hit the market perfectly, and they have the NFL structure in terms of Fox at noon, CBS at 3:30, and then a primetime game on NBC. And the way that they've expanded, and how the conference is going to be even deeper and larger, you're going to have a lot of TV windows that you can fulfill. And Fox isn't going anywhere. So, and the TV contracts go into the 2030s. So that's something that needs to be figured out.
How much could FSU and Clemson and anybody else who joins the parade in the ACC shaking that up maybe inspire leagues to maybe get on board with a plan like this, maybe not like you said specifically this one, to stop the constant reshuffling of the deck in realignment?
So, like, I don't pretend to be an expert on everything, but I do kind of focus on the media. You didn't say who's better, John Oren or me at the beginning. So
it's definitely you. It's definitely you.
All right, good. If John was on, would it have been? If John was on, would it have been him?
No, look.
Anyway.
Here's the deal. I mean, I'm
just kidding. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, when you look at Florida State, like, I don't, from a media perspective, if they were to get out of the ACC in the current makeup of college football, I don't know where they're getting this extra money TV-wise. Like, I don't know if the SEC is going to add them. I don't know if the Big Ten is going to add, because I don't think the networks are going to give more money to Florida State. And so the misnomer is you just kind of keep adding teams and get more money. And it's just, that's not how it works. There's a pie. And if you add another team, that pie gets sliced up with one more member. And so I don't know if they were to totally reorganize college football, in the proposal that we wrote about, then that would probably be more favorable for Florida State, because right now they're undervalued as compared to how good they are, what type of ratings they get, the fans that they have. And, this College Sports Tomorrow in a factual way, in an objective way, puts every school up against each other, and that's how they would be paid. And you'd be paid more if you brought more eyeballs to the table and you are worth more. So you get your full value of what you're worth. So that would be better for a Florida State as compared to what they have at the moment.
Would that be a sliding scale? Like, you're guaranteed, like Alabama's guaranteed at least this much, but if they hit like markers, then it would be up, so that just for example, a school like UCF, which would be guaranteed this percentage, but if they do hit those rating escalators, that they'll get a bonus, so to speak.
From what I understand from our reporting, it would be a sliding scale. It wouldn't just be, you could move up, and if you were to, build your fan base, like in Colorado would be a good example with Deion last year. Obviously they didn't do as well as they started. They didn't finish up as well, but they were much more popular, and their ratings. So like a team like that, I from what I understand, it wouldn't just be, let's just say this happened in 2030. That in 2030, where you stood, that's what you get for the next 100 years. It would move around depending on your program, how much you won, the eyeballs you brought in, and there'd be a formula that made sense in terms of who gets more of the money. And so it would not be stagnant, from what I was told.
Why would the TV networks want to do this, and why would they not?
So the plus, let's say two things here, okay? There already are contracts in place that they've agreed to, and some of them are pretty favorable to the networks. So number one, right now, they have no real interest in changing anything. They're happy with their contract. They agreed to them. But so that's a reason for them to, we had something in the story where there was a TV executive said that the whole thing was naive to think that they're going to get more money. The plus side is, I think if you start college football today, there's no other games, and you're trying to figure out the system. The system that the College Sports Tomorrow Night comes up with is a pretty good one, and I think it would be worth more. Like, I think you could organize the games better.
Regional conferences again.
You could have regional conferences. You could the way you pool the rating. Like if you look at like CBS and Fox, especially that 1:00 window on Sundays, there's a national game, but then there's also a lot of regional games, and then they pool the ratings together, and that's how you get your number that you sell your advertising against. That's an advantage, as opposed to there's three. At 1:00 on a Saturday, there's 10 games on. They're all competing against each other, so the ratings are lower, and your ad rates are lower, and how much money you get is less, and it's better most likely if you pull it together. It would be more advantageous for college football to negotiate with the networks as one entity, and where they could just schedule everything to make the most sense instead of everyone going for themselves. It would be akin to if the NFL were to have the rights for the AFC North bid, someone bidding on on those, and then they sold the NFC South to somebody else. Those wouldn't be as strong. It's pretty obvious. If you sell them all together, it's a much stronger, supply and demand situation where you would own all the supply, which would make the demand in theory go up. And now would the ratings be so much higher? I mean, that's one of the things that they seem to think. I don't know about that personally. I think they might. I think they likely would be, but I don't know. There's only so many Ohio State, Michigan, so many Alabama, Auburn games. You know what I mean? That you have, even if you made the schedule better.
Do you see people like E. Gordon Gee already seems like he's kind of in favor of this because he's part of it. He's a university president. How do you, I guess maybe the question would be, is there a way to keep the presidents out of this deal? Because if you ask most of the fans of the Pac-12, it's the president's fault that there's no Pac-12 anymore.
Well, I mean, that's a very good point. I don't know. I think the presidents are the presidents, so they're going to have a big say in it. I think we spoke to the Syracuse and West Virginia presidents. They want to get out in front of this. Presidents of universities have very big jobs, and even at football schools where football is so prevalent, it's not their full focus all the time. And so I think they'll be involved. And if you wanted real change that makes sense for everybody, it's probably the presidents who are going to do that because, I said it earlier, the networks, I think during realignment, this was misunderstood. I felt like when I look at social media, those are charities. They have shareholders. They're trying to make profit. That's what their goal is. So their goal is not, nor really should it be, to make college football a success for the next 100 years. Their goal is to help their business. And the conferences, I said how they're interested in furthering all this conference schools. So, presidents, in theory, if they were to work together, could maybe come up with a better system. I know there's a history where that hasn't happened. I think the Pac-12 is a pretty good example of that, where it seems like, it's hard to, I just reported on it from the media angle. I read the blame game when everything went down. If they listened to the podcast with John and I think they could have, they just listened to what we were saying. They could have probably cut to the chase and, Pac-12 would still be here. But, so I don't know. I think the presidents will be involved. I don't see how they're not.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, they're just, I know that I'd like to, just as an observer of this and someone who covers it, can we get a narrow group of them? Because there's too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to university presidents and these decisions. And most of them don't know. I mean, they don't know anything about sports. They're not trained in that. That's not what they were that's not why they came into the job of university president. Now, on the private equity side, what would be the pluses and minuses to private equity getting involved in anything like this?
Well, the plus is if they have this issue in terms of the courts and you needed capital to go forward and to get a plan that goes forward. Now, we drilled these people at College Sports Tomorrow about the private equity part because that's what we were, one of the things we were really investigating for the last 4 or 5 weeks. Because that's what we were hearing about. And they claim that they're not looking to have, they kind of didn't say no to it, but there's a little bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing, I would say, in terms of how they answered it. They didn't say it was off the table, but they also tried to downplay it because they didn't want that to be the focus. And, there's no proof yet, besides conjecture from other people that they're really trying to take over, or as one top administrator said to us, buy college football. That's not really proven. I mean, that's kind of been put out there. So the plus is you need an infusion of money. You need it now. You need to pay off all these things. The minus is that, there's some ownership of college football potentially from people. Now, the setup that they had, the universities would own college football. It would be set up like the MLS. If you're a soccer person, the MLS, you don't own your team, you own a percentage of the league. That makes it so everyone's kind of rowing the same direction at all times in terms of finances. And so that does make sense to me if that were the system. And obviously there'd be more, the percentage that you get from the overall deal would be more depending on if you're Alabama as compared to, a team that's in the second division that they propose. So that's where private equity would help. And then the negative, it's private equity. I don't think I need to say anymore.
Yeah.
I think we all got to have our, connotation of what private equity means and what they want and last dollar. And it's not really about athletics and all that kind of stuff. I think if there's a fear of that, I think it's probably well founded. Although the schools want to make money too. I mean, I think that's been proven as well.
Yeah, there was a line that I thought was kind of funny in one of these. I don't know if it was your column or somebody responding to it, but one of the guys said, "Look, this is private equity. We're not doing this just for the profit. We really want to help college football." I don't think anybody believes that at all.
Yeah, I tend not to.
Yeah.
I'm pretty cynical that way. I just don't. I think they usually look at undervalued propositions and try to make them the value that they think they're worth and go from there. And so I think that they might, I think that might be part of their calculus. I don't know. I would say that the people involved, from my experience with business people of this type, they generally aren't just doing things only at the goodness of their heart, although that was claimed to me on and off the record. And so, I can't call them I'm not going to call them liars. They seem pretty sincere about it, but we'll see where things go. And I definitely wouldn't rule it out that private equity plays a bigger part than they're letting on at this point. Because once you say that, I think it's gotten. They did better because they went on the record with us, which we had a story without with them possibly just going to decline comment, which we were trying to. If they did, we were anticipating, and we had put together a story, and we told them that, and we preferred them on the record, and they went on the record, which made it better for us, and I think for them as well. So I think the reaction, it's hard to say the overall reaction. I think there's been some really good reaction. People are like, this is a good idea, and then there's been some kind of some kind of super league or private equity or NFL persons involved, are just like, I don't want that. But here's the thing. You can long for yesterday, but that's gone, right? Mm. And so they're calling themselves tomorrow. I do think you have to think about tomorrow, and I think getting ahead of these things is smart. I mean, I do think they thought about it, and when they explain things to me, it does make a lot of sense. Now, is it doable? That's another question.
Yeah, college sports yesterday has been running college sports forever. So college sports tomorrow is long overdue. Andrew, when you started covering sports media, I'm sure it felt kind of matter of fact at the beginning of these things are getting bigger and, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, TV deals, guys moving around job to job and things that have interest. Could you have ever imagined the interest in your niche of the sports media in the business side of this getting as big as it has when you started reporting on it?
I mean, not to be like I could. I mean, I kind of, because I kind of understood some of the things. I think the one thing that's a misnomer, and I've said this when I talk to people about, new jobs and, getting back into this and all that kind of stuff, because I was at ESPN for 11 years covering mostly baseball, is that, it's like today I'm a college football writer. It's about the media, but it's a college football writer. Tomorrow I might be, today I also wrote a story about NFL Network, so I'm kind of an NFL writer. And so it just cuts through, and it also, the media runs sports. If you go back to the realignment, I mean, that was all media. Not that, I think it's a little misnomer like Fox and ESPN were pulling every string. I think that's wrong, personally. But their money behind it is why decisions were made by the conferences. If you look back during COVID, the reason they played a certain amount of games in baseball and hockey and the NBA, those are to fulfill certain contracts, so they got paid in full. And so there's just, I could keep going on and on. You look at the 100 most watched TV shows. Now, mostly they're the NFL, like 92 to 98% of them are. But that's what's running things. That's why players are paid so much money. And so, and in this case, the media and especially the networks are going to have a huge say on the future of college football. and they have pre-existing contracts that are going to have to be, if anything happens in the next, 5 to 6 years, the TV contracts and what's in place are going to have to be accounted for. And what we wrote about, and we mentioned it, that the TV networks are going to have to be brought in if this idea is going to work, and they're going to have to be satisfied because they have some good contracts that they're not going to just rip up because, oh, you guys want to do a new deal. They're not going to pay more money for a lesser product. They have their loyalty is to making money for their shareholders and running a business. So to answer your question, it's people are interested, and people are interested in a lot of things. And it's very interesting. I try to write it as try to make it as fascinating as possible for people when they read and easy to understand.
Yeah, Andrew, and that's you do a great job at that because again, like those of us on the show, I mean, we're in the sports media business. We feel like we understand it, but then there's just so many levels above and around and things you never even consider, especially when all this realignment stuff happened. You need somebody to educate you on it. You do a great job. Thank you so much for being on the show. We've wanted you on for a very long time, and so great to finally have you on the show. Great stuff, and really loving that you're on The Athletic now and adding to that great staff.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
That's Andrew Marchand of The Athletic. We have, Garrett, wanted him on the show for a very long time. So, Smoaky, guys.